Second Amendment. Members of Congress used the massacre on the Vegas Strip to advance their anti-liberty agenda.
I implore my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to find that same courage to come to the table and have real conversations about common sense solutions to address gun violence. There is no single policy solution, but I know we can support the Second Amendment while taking reasonable steps to reduce the carnage inflicted on our communities by gun violence and mass shootings.
We will speak with preeminent gun expert John Lott about bump stocks and problems with the Vegas investigation. Also, the rapper Eminem with a gratuitous ad hominem rhyming attack on the 45th president.
But we better give Obama props, because what we got in office now's a kamikaze that'll probably cause a nuclear holocaust. And while the drama pops and he waits for to quiet down, he'll just gas his plane up and fly around till the bombing stops. Intensity's heightened.
Also, Budweiser puts the heat on the NFL as the boycott gains strength. Plus, stop the tape. Planned Parenthood comes out against religious liberty.
9 out of 10 women during their reproductive life years will use birth control at some point.
Including 95% of Catholic women, may I point out.
Right. It's
despite the position of the medieval Catholic Church.
That's exactly right. Women of all, makes and religions use birth control.
Plus, why tax relief is great. It's great, as long as all Americans have skin in the game. Stand by. The doors, the newsroom are locked, and the PC police are not getting in, so sit back and relax as we unfold today's edition of the Daily Ledger.
Las Vegas, please join us in 58 seconds of silence for the 58 individuals who lost their lives on 1 October. These individuals will never be forgotten. May their light long shine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Graham Ledger, and welcome to the Daily Ledger. Our cover story: Vegas strong, while fans of the new hockey franchise in Las Vegas salute the victims and the first responders. Police and the Mandalay Bay Hotel argue over a timeline problem. At issue, how many minutes before the massacre did the gunman, Stephen Paddock, fire at hotel employees? And why weren't police on this guy then and there? Let's face it, the answers to those questions could be embarrassing, either to the Mandalay and or police.
I think the frustrating piece is people expect the answers now. And I think the important thing is for people to understand it's going to take some time. We're looking for a trigger point, and right now we haven't been able to find one. And I got to be frank with you, we may never know, but I am comfortable in saying on a day-to-day basis we have a little bit more information. But something that happened in his life, a death, a divorce, loss of job, all those things, radicalization, all those things that you would expect to find, we have not found. Who has provided us a substantial amount of information is Gaining Control, and they provided all their historical knowledge associated with his winnings and losses, and through that evaluation, it doesn't appear that he had any debt. It's very difficult for me to believe that he remained silent on all the nuances of this, and nobody else would be aware of the possibility of this or assisted him in the development of this. Right now, I'm comfortable saying we don't believe there's a second shooter. But there was rumors going around that he was with a prostitute. There's rumor of some mysterious blonde, and none of that has been aired. We have not found any indication of that. We have information available and helped them on, I believe, 2 occasions, but no derogatory information from the bellman. Part of me losing sleep, Glenn, is all these days is, did I miss something? Did I fail to do something? Did my people fail to do something? Same with Aaron Rouse of the FBI. He hasn't slept either. Did the FBI fail to do something? We haven't been able to point to anything yet. I have not experienced one negative comment from the community.
And so, as investigators struggle with why Democrat lawmakers in Washington, D.C. have no problem politicizing the mass murder to advance their radical anti-Second Amendment agenda.
I implore my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to find that same courage to come to the table and have real conversations about common sense solutions to address gun violence. There is no single policy solution, but I know we can support the Second Amendment while taking reasonable steps to reduce the carnage inflicted on our communities by gun violence and mass shootings. Mr. Speaker, devices designed to cause mass casualties like bump stocks and high-capacity magazines, they have no practical purpose for hunting or self-defense, and they only increase the threat for potential victims trying to find safety, like those at the Mandalay Bay, and they make it more challenging for law enforcement to confront and neutralize an active shooter. I urge all of my colleagues to please join together in a bipartisan effort. We need to take common sense steps in Congress to decrease the scope of widespread destruction and tragic mass shootings.
And so, just as predicted, today it's bump stocks, tomorrow it's the whole enchilada, Amendment number 2. The very right infused into the Constitution whose purpose is to prevent these very temporary politicians from doing exactly what they're doing right now, attacking personal liberty. Banning bump stocks will do nothing to prevent people from killing other people. It would only give more fodder to the anti-gun agenda. Joining me now from Alexandria, Virginia, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center and preeminent expert of firearms in this country, John Lott. John, I'm sure I want to talk about bump stocks with you and high-capacity magazines and what have you, but first I want to talk about the Las Vegas investigation. I'm sure you've been following it the way we have. A week and a half later, a lot of things are jumping out at me, especially as it pertains to the timeline and what happened inside the Mandalay Bay Hotel and the security guard and the maintenance worker and all that before the shooting began. Week and a half later, what jumps out at you?
I agree. It's hard to understand why a week and a half afterwards we don't have at least a good idea why the police took 2 hours to go and stop him there. That's an amazingly long period of time. I understand that in the initial days afterwards, you imagine that there's going to be a lot of confusion, that new facts are going to come forward, that mistakes are going to be made in terms of the time. But when you're talking about such a very long period of time, one would hope by this time you would at least have some basic explanation for why it took the amount of time it did.
Back when I was not a cub reporter, but I was a reporter on the beat, I covered a murder inside a home. And I'll never forget one of the investigators walking up to me and telling me, have you ever fired a firearm inside a residence or a building or something like that? Right. He says, if you ever do, you'll never forget. Of course, I've been on a firing range before, but that's with protection for ears, etc. The point he was trying to make is that inside a building of some kind, there is obviously some awesome reverberation going on. So this guy is inside a hotel, and now we come to find out that he fired somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 rounds outside or through the door of his hotel room, and somehow there was this long delay of police. Does this make sense to you?
It's hard to believe. I mean, when you go to an indoor firing range, it's not only that you have ear protection on, but they have foam on the walls and other things in order to try to absorb the sound, because firing inside a building is dramatically different than firing outside in terms of how loud it is and the damage it will do to your ears. So, look, I'm happy to wait a little bit longer, but I would have thought by now we would have had at least some basic explanation for why it took the amount of time that it did, because you think people below, in the floors below or above or to the side, or even just anywhere in the hallway would have heard, as you say, the very loud reverberations from that firing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, shooting through the door? I mean, what about the people across the hall, for crying out loud? It just doesn't add up to me. And again, the Mandalay Bay is painting a little bit of a different picture in terms of the timeline versus police. So hopefully we can get it sorted out here, and hopefully people aren't covering their rear ends in a situation like this. We ought to know the truth so we can deal with it as rational Americans and not just simply attack the Second Amendment. I feel for the sheriff, as he looks for some sort of motive like this, and I think he's right that somebody knows something somewhere. Don't you agree with that? That somebody not necessarily helped him out, but he had to have some sort of collateral exposure to somebody during this entire process.
You would think that he would have made some comment to somebody, whether it be the woman that he was living with or somebody else, about being angry at things. I mean, she has made statements apparently that he'd be lying in bed and moaning and stuff like that about how bad the world was. And you would think that she would ask him, okay, well, so what are you upset about or something during all the time that she was living with him? But, I haven't been in on the interviews, and I assume not everything that she said has been released. The one thing to bring up in the point that you made before that, and that is, I think it's important for police relatively quickly to come out with some explanation for why it's taken the amount of time it did, the 2 hours, for them to stop them, because otherwise there would be kind of concerns that the police are kind of lining up stories or something like that. And I think the sooner that they can get that out, the better.
Yeah, and I think it's very important that we do come up with some sort of explanation at some point, because you don't want this hanging over the heads of the American people. If you just have some random act of violence out there, and people are always looking for the reason why, and it's important for us to know why, to know who the enemy is in case this happens again. Now, speaking of the enemy, the people in Washington, D.C. who are politicizing this, to me, are unbelievable. And now, of course, they're going after bump stocks, which I didn't even know existed until this massacre took place. Two weeks ago, I didn't know anything about it. I own some firearms, but I didn't know anything about it. I'm not a gun expert like you. You probably know about it. But there's a piece of video that I wanted to play. It's 18 seconds long. It's a gentleman with a semi-automatic rifle of some kind. I don't know what it is. But he is showing how you can operate this firearm as if it had a bump stock without a bump stock. Roll tape.
That's 10 rounds. Goes really fast when you bump fire.
Okay, so there's no bump stock there. This is all done with just his hands. And so here's my point. The American people, as ingenious as we are as a group, are going to find a way to execute a bump stock, whether they have a bump stock or not. And then nefarious people, that is bad guys, are probably going to get their hands on a bump stock or something equivalent that they want, no matter what, through the black market.
Right. Look, in an earlier clip, you had somebody talking about wanting to have rules that ban bump stocks as well as high-capacity magazines. It's the same point for all these things. A magazine, for example, is a box with a spring in it. It's extremely easy to make. I've seen people put one together in 2 minutes from scratch, being able to use a press. And so, the notion is when you pass these types of laws, who's going to obey them? You're going to have criminals will be able to go and get them if they don't just simply make them themselves. And you take something like mass public shootings, where virtually all these have been taking place in areas where guns are banned. If I am a citizen with a concealed carry permit and I'm law-abiding, I'll obey the rule. The only magazine I'll have will be the one that's in my gun. And if you limit me to 7 rounds like they try to do in New York, or 10 rounds like they do in California, that's what I'm limited to. But a killer who's planning to do an attack, he's going to take as many magazines as he wants with him in there, and he's going to be well prepared. And so you're only going to be putting the law-abiding citizen who might be able to stop them at a disadvantage relative to the killers.
In other words, banning bump stocks is going to do absolutely nothing, probably, we could safely say here, to save anyone's life. If a killer wants to kill, they're going to kill. Which leads me to Congress and in your opinion, what they should be doing. What should Congress be focusing on post-mass killing like this? Would it be more guns, as your book famously says, more guns, less crime? Would it be H.R. 38, which has not been brought to the floor yet, which is the reciprocity, concealed carry reciprocity? What should Congress be working on?
Well, rather than just looking at one case, this last one, this horrible tragedy, I think you should look at the broad range of cases that we're talking about. As I mentioned, over 98% of these mass public shootings take place where victims aren't allowed to defend themselves. And you find that these killers, time after time, explicitly mention that's why they pick those venues, because they want to go to a place where nobody's going to be able to stop them, at least quickly, so that they can kill as many people as possible. If it were me, I would try to start getting rid of as many of those gun-free zones as we can. And the reciprocity bill is just one way. I mean, I get emails from truckers and people who are traveling, and if they have to go through New York or New Jersey or Maryland or California or Illinois, they may be disarmed during their entire trip because of the law that's there. You have truck drivers that have valuable property. But, you know, if I have tourists that may be at some type of venue where there might be an attack, why not give them a chance to be able to go and defend themselves? On our website at crimeresearch.org, we have dozens of cases that don't get national news coverage where civilians with permanent concealed handguns have stopped mass public shootings, according to either police or prosecutors. These get local news coverage. They don't get the national news coverage. If they hadn't been there and many people had been killed, then we would have heard about them.
What's your website, John, just for the record, in case people want to see those cases?
crimeresearch.org or crimeresearch.org.
Crimeresearch.org. John Lott, yeah, I think when people look for lessons from incidents like this, and in a very real sense, and I mean this sincerely, that in a free society, maybe we can't stop something like this, that killers, if they have a mindset they're going to kill one way or another, whether it's a gun or fertilizer or an airplane, killers...
But look at this guy here. He had apparently wired his car with ammonium nitrate and some things that were like napalm. According to the police, at his home, he had, quote-unquote, a lot of homemade explosive devices that were there. I mean, one just needs to look around the world. This is the first attack in the United States where we've had something equivalent to a machine gun being used. Europe, it's quite common. Look at the 4 mass public shootings that occurred in 2015 in France. Each one of those involved a machine gun. Whether it be Belgium or Germany or other places, they've involved machine guns. The United States, despite the news coverage that we receive, has been a relative oasis in terms of having fewer of these mass public shootings than the rest of the world. We have had, during the Obama administration, we had fewer casualties per capita from mass public shootings than the European Union did. And the rest of the world is even much, much worse.
And to your point, those countries in Europe, the entire countries are gun-free zones. John Lott, thank you. Coming up next, the possible precedent